Hello, everyone. My name is Vito Qualia, and this is a matter of principle. Today's guest is Jessica Kronhauer, the Executive Director of Leadership Northeast. Jess is a true mover and shaker in the world of leadership. She has done so much to promote, mentor, and celebrate leadership in Northeastern Pennsylvania. I've really been looking forward to this conversation. So without any further ado, let's welcome Jess to the podcast. Welcome, Jess.
Thank you so much for having me, Vito. I am so excited to be here.
Well, thank you for giving us the time. We'll start off by just letting our listeners get to know you a little bit. So if you wouldn't mind, give us a little bio of your story of kind of how it started and what your journey was to get where you're at right now at Leadership Northeast.
Oh, it's a story best told over cocktails, but I'll do my best to give you the quick and short version. So I'm a local girl. I went to Myers High School back in the day. I had phenomenal educators there and went on to the University of Scranton. I have a bachelor's degree in English and psychology, which, prepares you for anything or nothing, depending on what you want to do with it. But I loved writing. I loved communications. And my first role was at the Greater Wilkes-Barre Chamber of Business and Industry at the time. I learned a lot about the area, a lot about writing and learning how to network professionally, and had the opportunity to go through what was at the time Leadership Wilkes-Barre. So that was way back in 2004. And I was just a kid getting started, and it really changed the trajectory of my career, even at that young age. I went on to New York City. I spent some time at NYU and in education in the city. And when I moved back to the area, I ended up in workforce development of sorts, which is not somewhere I expected to be, but taught me a tremendous amount about what the ins and outs of the workforce needs are and how employers and education and government all work together. And when I decided to get a teaching degree, it was through the King's College FEST program. Really great program. They still offer it now. If you have a bachelor's in certain areas, you can work strictly on your teaching credentials. So I came out of there and had a teaching certification in secondary English, and I spent a few years in a variety of different school districts around here trying to get a full-time job. And right when I couldn't really wait much longer to get a full-time teaching job, I had the opportunity to come back to Leadership Wilkes-Barre because my predecessor was retiring at the time and they had some intentions to expand. And I was able to bring my education experience to the table right then and there and started running the junior intercollegiate programs, and we created some new programs in education as well. So it was a long road to get here, and probably not something that I expected I would do when I graduated from college, but it has been since day one the most incredible professional experience I could have ever asked for.
And it's definitely a windy tale a little bit, but
very much.
We have something in common. I was an English and history major at Wilkes back in the day, and again, same thing that I thought prepares you for everything or nothing. And at that time, in my first couple of years in college, I thought I wanted to go to law school, but then I thought I don't really want to put all that work in, so I was trying to figure out what else to do. But I got into education because I was coaching at the time and really liked to work with young people, so kind of morphed into that world, similar to where you were going. But you get to, in dealing with what you do on a daily basis with the programs and the people that you interact with, you really get to meet and talk with and build relationship with, I'm sure, really interesting people. What would you say is the best part of your job, of that, that interaction with so many people and so many communities, things like that? What's the best thing about it?
That's a great question. I could say a lot of things in response to that. So Leadership Northeast, just for the sake of folks who may not know what we do, this organization's been around for over 40 years, and it was created to ensure the quality and the good potential and the future of Northeastern Pennsylvania from all different areas. So from an industry perspective, from a quality of life perspective, and to make sure that there were people who had the tools they needed and the awareness they needed to be good stewards of the community and to be invested in it and to make sure that it lives up to its potential. So the folks who are attracted to the programs that we run are the ones who are growth minded. They see the positive side of the area. They want to be connected to each other, to the community, and they bring their talents and their motivations and momentum to the table. So we get to work with kids in high school all the way up through executives who are here for good and to be a part of the solution and not the problem. And that's a remarkably privileged way to live your work life every day, because we are surrounded by such incredibly insightful and creative people who we learn from constantly. As much as we teach them and the people and the speakers we put in front of them teach them, we are learning from them as well. So it's a fascinating job. And I'm surprised every year by what I learn about the folks who come to us. And it's just interesting every day because of what we get to be surrounded by. And we have the privilege of focusing on all the good stuff. So I think that's what I love about it the most.
Well, I mean, I have my own personal opinion on this, and I won't cloud you with it right now. I'll let you kind of talk about what you think, and then we'll share. But why is it important now in 2024 to develop quality leaders? Like, why do you think? What do you see in your interactions with people in the business world or just the community at large, things like that? But do you, or maybe you don't feel that it's really that important right now to develop leaders? But do you think it is, and why would that be?
I think it's more important than it's ever been. So again, this organization's been around for a long time, and we're not unique. There are organizations like ours all over the country and different parts of the world, because I think for a long time, community and business leaders have acknowledged that we need an army of people who aren't just capable and equipped with resources and tools to address the needs of the community, but who feel a sense of accountability to address solutions and to see problems for what they are, where they come from, and feel a responsibility to be the helpers, right? To be the ones who don't just look at a situation and say, somebody should do something about that. I'll throw a shout out to Dave Pedry from the Luzerne Foundation. He speaks to our classes a lot. And one of my favorite quotes that he always says is, we would always get approached with someone saying they should do something about that. They should do something about that. And he'll say, guess what, guys? Like, there is no they. We're the they. We're the ones who can step up and be a part of the solution. And, whether it's economic issues or political issues, government issues, education issues, we need to be held accountable for figuring out what our resources are, figuring out how to apply our strengths, and collaborating in a way that, we're not worried about who's getting credit for it, but how is it really solving problems? And we need all sorts of perspectives and mindsets at the table in order to do that well. And I think the world on every level needs folks who can think critically about how problems are created and how they can be solved, and will be willing to work together to find those solutions.
And I think, sometimes leadership, can be viewed in two different ways. There could be your leader that is the visual representation of a group of people or a company or a town, whatever, you know what I mean? The guy who's shaking hands and kissing babies, that kind of, like the political kind of leader, that thing, which is needed. But then you have the concept of the servant leader, the Simon Sinek, the leaders eat last kind of almost, motherly type of thing where, moms are always in charge and they take it, but they feed everybody else and then they sit down and they eat, that kind of thing. And you see that, and I'm a big Simon Sinek fan. I mean, his talks on, how the military has that same thing where the sergeants are in charge of the guys and they're the ones that make sure everybody else is taken care of, and then they take care of themselves. So that servant leader versus the person, the man or woman out there who gets the accolades maybe, but maybe is or isn't doing the things behind the scene to actually get the work done. So, and I think your message, your mission with your program has always been that servant leader, rolling your sleeves up, working shoulder to shoulder with your group of people, and leading that way, which in my world in education, I mean, that's what we see and that's what we try to promote, because, you get all these hundreds and thousands of kids through the districts. You don't know who the next leaders are going to be. So we try to have a common ground where we're preparing everybody, and that's going to lead to the next question. Do you think that leaders are born, or is that something you can grow into? And I'm sure everybody comes to your program wants to be a leader at some capacity, but do you see people coming with certain characteristics and you guys help develop them, or do you think anyone can become a leader?
This is such an interesting question, and it's a question that leadership as an industry has been mulling over and considering since it was invented. I believe that just about anyone can develop their leadership abilities. I believe that agility is probably one of the characteristics that we need most right now. And folks are often surprised when they come to us because I think they expect to be taught how to be the loudest person in the room, right? Or the one with the biggest presence that everyone is going to be influenced by and sort of obey, right? And that's the opposite of what we teach and what we talk about. We definitely work from a place of servant leadership. I mean, you can't deny that like some of that characteristic leadership stuff, it's always going to be present because that's just how we're wired as human beings. But I think absolutely that a person can develop qualities that will enhance their ability to influence people. And that's really what it all becomes about. And we talk about meeting people where they are and that the leader's responsibility is Simon Sinek. I love that you're a fan of his. He says it, it's taking care of people in your charge. It's not being in charge of people and listening and learning about what people need so that they can become a version of themselves that will step up to the plate about empowering others, helping them step into their power, acknowledging their strengths, addressing their limitations and their barriers, and creating a space where people feel that they have equitable access to making decisions, to power. But, then sometimes someone in a leadership role needs to be the one who makes the decisions and needs to step into that leadership aspect of who they are. And I think it's that agility or that versatility that makes someone really qualified for a role in a leadership capacity.
I love that idea of agility. I never really, I probably should have come to your program. And actually I did. I signed up for Leadership Wilkes-Barre back in the day. And when I was my first or second year as a very young administrator, and something happened and it just didn't work out, and I couldn't actually go to it. So I wanted to do it. I had the drive to go through the program, and it just didn't work out. But the idea of versatility and agility is huge because you're always pivoting. I mean, that's one of the things that I think I always look at is like the two sides of the coin type of thing, where I think this is just a Vito thing. I think to be a leader, you do have to have you have to have some ego. You have to have the confidence to stick your chin out there because, you have to think, well, why should it be you rather than everybody behind you? So you have to have that, a little bit of that, but you have to have the humility to know when you don't know something and to ask and to find the resources and to keep learning. So it's a balance, right? You have to have the thick skin and not be afraid to take the blows when you're out there and it's your vision or your word about something. But at the same time, you have to know what your limitations are and how to be the best teammate you can be, and I think sometimes leaders fall short when they lean one way or the other too much. Does that make sense?
I absolutely agree with you. I think that rigidity is where people, or they lean on what they've always done, and in some circumstances that works for folks for a long time. But I think especially since we saw the changes in the workforce from COVID and what that has done to options that people have in the workforce, to the way organizations function on every level, that it's intimidating and it can be scary because it's new and it's different, but folks in leadership roles have had to learn to adapt to that or things have fallen apart. Mm-hmm. So very much, always, but definitely in the last couple of years, we have seen the need to explore different versions of leadership that maybe weren't as necessary or expected as they have been in the past.
So in your path to where you are currently, back when you were in school, were you a leader? Were you the president of the class and the leader of this club or that club or a team captain? Were you always a leader, or is that something that you've kind of come to later on in your career?
Maybe a little bit of both. I had an extraordinary group of classmates, people who I still have such immense respect for, very, competitive in a really healthy way, just some brilliant people that I got to spend my time with in education. I was always involved And in sports, it was competitive, something I'm still trying to shake. We had a really great peer group who held each other to high standards. And I like to think that carried through college and in my careers. My opportunity to step into the role I have now is a culmination of so many things, not the least of which was my work with Lori Nocito, who stepped into her role the year I went through the program way back in 2004 and welcomed me back here as a teammate and then helped me learn how to manage and direct and really guide this organization, because we have a beautiful shared leadership model here. We have a tiny team, and the women that I share this work with are just as invested and just as capable as I am to do what we do. And it's really, and even more so, I would say the people that come through our programs continue to contribute at a really special level. And we dive into our alumni feedback, and we have so many volunteers that we rely on. So leadership is in so many ways bigger than any one of us. And I think that's why it's so successful, because it continues to be the culmination of insights and perspectives and experiences of just some incredible people who I continue to learn from every single day.
Well, and I think one of the keys to your success, the program's success, is really the way it evolves. It doesn't really rest on the laurels of things that work. You're looks like you're constantly looking at new programs and new groups of people, new cohorts to help, push along the way to their next level, their next challenge. And I think that's immensely important to keep evolving and not get stale. Now, you talked about, there's programs, for the younger kids, for students, for school students. Are there differences between the programs that help young leaders develop versus, maybe more of your seasoned career leaders that you're, working with? Are there similarities and differences in both of those?
Sure. Yeah. It would surprise most people at how much the content is similar. And the junior leadership program, so kids apply as sophomores and then they participate as juniors in high school. It's a very competitive program. It breaks my heart every year that we can't let every single person in who applies, because they're all incredible. But the kids that come in are really committed to a pretty intensive and transformative experience. But they really get a lot of the leadership training that the adults get, and which in my mind is an unprecedented opportunity for a 16 or 17-year-old student. And we watch them develop and take these responsibilities on in such remarkable ways that I think sometimes, it takes them a couple of years to even realize what they actually did when they were here and how impressive it is. We tailor the content to the needs of the audience. So the kids, we try to keep things more relevant in terms of, where are you headed with your education and career trajectory? And we focus a lot with them on exposing what the workforce needs from them. And I know you've talked about this on your podcast. I'm a huge proponent of building bridges between business and education. And, there's always the misnomer of employers think there are no people for their jobs, and the kids who need the jobs think there are no employers. And so we try really hard to showcase what's available here in Northeastern Pennsylvania from a career perspective, and create some insight and some enlightenment around how whether it's a college path, whether it's a trade path, or somewhere in between, what that could look like for them as adults here in Northeastern Pennsylvania, whether they leave and come back, or they stay here from high school into the workforce, whatever their path looks like. We try to focus on that a little bit more. And then at the core level, that's really more about, what does the system of Northeastern Pennsylvania look like? You're an adult, you're working, lots of them have families. So we get really isolated in our own lives. And so we try to expose them to the greater system of Northeastern Pennsylvania and how the community works from a private industry, public sector, education, government, all the things together, and what their role is within it, not just in their organization, but overall, and how they can then connect with what they're passionate about and where they can make a difference and how they can serve on a board or volunteer for an organization or address a need that they became aware of. Because as much as we focus on the good stuff, we also try to expose the needs and where help should go. And they spend a lot of time working on those projects. In Impact, our program for educators, we focus on, it's premier leadership development. It's that exposure to business and education partnerships, but it's how can you use this content to enhance the experience for your students? How can you collaborate from district to district and solve problems collaboratively that, maybe something's been addressed 10 minutes up the road that your district is still struggling with. And we put 30 teachers in a room together and just magic comes out of it. And our Amplify Women's Leadership Certificate program focuses on a woman's experience in the workforce and how she can identify and highlight her strengths and meet goals. And, that's a remarkably unique experience for the women who go through it. Then our executive program is for C-level folks who are at a different point in their career and want to build connections and need to learn about the area. So yeah, they're all pretty custom experiences, but at the heart of it is our servant leadership philosophy and being here to make the community better and make people better so they can be a part of that.
Well, and thanks for, well, no, that was a great answer because you're really kind of expanded on all the different, aspects of what Leadership Northeast really does and all the different groups that it, tailors to, which is awesome. One of the things that, and again, on a personal note, our children had the opportunity to go through, when they were in school and to see how they developed and now what they're doing in college and post grad, taking on leadership roles and things like that. So that's there's definitely the seeds of that were definitely planted in going through, programs like yours. So it was, I can see, Joanne and I, see the impact that having that training and experiences, what it does for young people. And I'm sure, Joanne went through, just recently and graduated from the program. And I saw firsthand all the work they were doing with their community project. So that's what I'm going to ask next. What you guys are so focused and rightfully so on giving back and doing something for the community. And there's so many programs and different things that have happened over the years, but is there anything that stands out, like some really cool community projects that groups have done that you could kind of highlight right now? Anything that comes to mind?
Gosh, so many of them come to mind. I mean, we're at the point now the Community Impact Project is all we really say is your team has to come to a consensus around a need that you want to address, mm-hmm. right? So they have full autonomy over what they choose to do as long as everybody's on board. And that's part of the process. And we talk about that all the time that, it's the project is important, but it's about the process. It's about learning to bring very different people together to accomplish something extraordinary and learning how to work through all those differences of opinion and perspective and experience. And that's leadership, right? So, and you'll appreciate this being in education, we try to be very experiential with what we do. And the Community Impact Project is just that. It's a practical application of the leadership development that they're getting. And so every month it's like, okay, here's another tool. Now go apply it out in the community to what you're doing. And we have watched folks build parks, renovate spaces in nonprofit organizations. We have watched them do just remarkable transformations in curriculums. And because the impact program, those teachers do projects within the schools, which is really special and doesn't get as much promotion because it's on a smaller level. It's not out in the community. But I have seen teachers completely revamp cultures in their classroom. One year, one of the school districts, unfortunately, had some specials removed from their day to day. So things like art and music, there were budget issues and the teachers were now doing these in the classroom. So a teacher collaborated with Misericordia University's education department and she brought it in. She had students from Misericordia come in and do art and music with her students and have some of those experiences that they weren't necessarily able to get in school. So we've had teachers build outdoor classrooms and replace lockers and big changes. 2 teachers just last year created they wanted to bring the students and the faculty together. So they created a beautiful event out on the stadium in the middle of the summer that it was a huge hit. And our core programs, we're up to 7 projects a year now, and the juniors do 10. So they are touching so many different facets of the community. This past year, a really unique project, they were called New Books on the Block. And it was one of the RFPs, because we receive RFPs from nonprofits who are looking for some help. This was the creation of a library in the Luzerne County prison system. So they partnered with Luzerne County Dress for Success and Linda Loop, who has been working on some projects within the prison system. And it's just an area in a population that is so often overlooked and has a lot of need in regard to their access to literature and to learning. And Linda worked with this group to do a massive book drive and to improve some furniture and stuff. So they rebuilt the library inside the prison. And it was not just a campaign for literacy and for helping those folks improve their skills. So when they have an opportunity to come back out into society, that they're more qualified for work, but it was also a massive awareness campaign and got conversations started around an issue that is often overlooked. So we're incredibly proud of that group, who I just spoke with them, and, they're looking at ways that they can continue this work in other areas. So that sustainability is so beautiful. And when people realize what they can accomplish when they work together and leverage their resources and really truly find solutions to some beautiful, important needs, it's a great part about what we do.
Well, it is. And it's so needed because, and I'm going to go off on this crazy tangent here, so excuse me for a second, but I'm a big Bruce Springsteen fan, right? And if you go to a Springsteen show, he just has this ability to take these thousands of people on this journey. And now, again, everyone's paid tons of money to go see him, and they're all fans, you would think. But from the beginning of the show to the end of the show, there's a journey, and collectively there's an energy, and it's palpable, and you feel it. And he's a master, showman. So he knows what he's doing. He has, 50,000 people in the palm of his hand, and he's taking on this journey. And it just reminds me of the idea of, you said what people can do when they work together. I mean, there's energy, you can't, there's momentum. If you're at a sporting event, you feel momentum. If you're in any large group of people, you could feel, it could be negative, it could be positive. If you have a large group of people with a goal that's sinister or evil, it's a mob. If you have a large group of people with a lofty goal for transformation, it's a congregation, right? I mean, so it's that person in front of the group, or the people in front of the group, that guides it to where it needs to be. And then the idea of a large group of people, getting them to work together, you need communication skills and patience, and you need foresight. You have to say, okay, we're here now. This is where we want to be. How do we draw the map to where we want to be? So there's all those little pieces are things that you guys develop, talk about, and I'm sure you do it much more articulately than I just did. But the idea of having that person or people, who's willing to kind of put themselves out there a little bit. And I think that's what is so, I see that now in some of these the younger folks out there, school students. I'm in a high school, so I see high school students all the time, but just in the interaction of our kids and how they're going through their early 20s and stuff, there's a remarkable kind of servant leadership movement in this younger generation. I don't know if you see that as well in what you're dealing with, but more so than maybe the kids, from 5, 10, 15 years ago. Not to say, I just think for whatever reason, where we are in history, what's going on in the world, maybe these kids are growing up at a certain time, they had to go through COVID and all these other things, and they're kind of bonded with perseverance because they've gone through. Do you see that too? Do you see any kind of change with maybe some of the kids coming through junior leadership now, whether it's, a positive thing like I see, or do you think every year there's just growth anyway?
That's a really interesting question.
Yeah, that was I felt like in the middle of all that, I felt like I was starting my own philosophy. So I was trying to come back, but it goes to that idea of what's out there, like this mindset that I think everyone's starting to feel it, but in absence of, I don't want to get into faith and religion, things like that, man-made, rules and versus whatever, but communities knowing they have to take care of each other, right? And having the leadership and the knowledge base of how to help those communities do that. I'm seeing a change in the positive in more young people wanting to take on those roles. That's what I'm asking.
I agree with you. I think there's a couple of things going on. And I mean, the kids we get in junior leadership, they're already wired that way.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we're really spoiled with seeing this remarkable audience of, I mean, I wasn't like that at 16. I was in Key Club, but the stuff these kids are doing, man, it blows my mind every single year. But I think one of the things that is happening is that they see it, right? They are so connected with what is happening all across the world in ways that many of us weren't until we had the technology that we have now. And not only that, but they have learned how to leverage these platforms so that they can use their voices, and it works, and they start movements. They gather followers. They have power in ways that maybe they never had power before. And we always hope that people choose to use that power for good, right? And when they choose to do that, they've been able to accomplish really remarkable things. And I think there is definitely a social responsibility in these younger generations. And I think they'll do wonderful things with it. And what we try to do is help them take big ideas and turn them into action steps, and take that project process and those ideas from this sounds great and wouldn't it be neat if we could to actually accomplishing it. And they get a little taste of that, and sometimes they really run with it. And that is so neat to see. And we always start off the year with, it's a big thing, right? It's a big thing to look at the community and all the needs, and it can be very overwhelming. And when you start realizing how many problems need to be solved, it can be really hard to figure out where to start. So we always talk about mission statements and trying to bottle that feeling you have when you actually make it happen and you see the change that you're affecting and the positive outcomes, and using that to get you from start to finish and motivating you when it gets difficult, because it gets very difficult to take some of these things on. But I agree with you. I have a lot of optimism and a lot of faith in where we're going in that regard.
Now, you mentioned, social media platforms. Is that something that you guys talk about, the use of those platforms in communicating your messaging and anything you do? Is that or is that outside of kind of what you guys are doing, or is it a necessary evil now?
Yeah, no, we try to be as innovative as we possibly can. And I mean, that was handed to us whether we wanted it to be or not in the midst of COVID. I mean, we literally bring people together for a living, and that didn't go so well with the pandemic when we weren't allowed to be in the same room with each other. So we had to get really creative and started using, everything from Zoom to Teams to Instagram. And we try to use it as effectively as we can. I think we could be better, but we have definitely leaned into trying to spread the word about what we do and what these people accomplish. We also kind of like to maintain a little bit of mystery around what it is, but we promote that way as much as we can, and we encourage other folks to do it too, because it's catching, right? Like that stewardship and that accomplishment of being able to affect positive change is catching, and we love to see it spread as far as it possibly can.
And I think there's some kind of, contagious energy when someone does something for the first time, and again, it could be somebody who's been working at a company for 20 some years and, they're new into your program, or the high school kids involved. But there's that freeing idea of when you do something, you don't realize there's certain boundaries that are there. You just do it. You don't know you're not supposed to do this or not supposed to do. So you just kind of go with it. And that's how some great innovations come around, because people are trying things that why not try this? Why not try that? So and again, that's must be a really cool thing about what you guys do, is you see these people come through and it's new, and it's, again, with the icebreakers and, there's always a awkward getting to know each other kind of stuff. But once you get past that and you start to build the bonds, you get to see these people, you get a lot of light bulb moments, I'm sure, when you see the growth and you see what people realize they can actually accomplish. That has to be really rewarding.
Oh my gosh. It never gets old. And it's the thing that everyone is the most nervous about. And it makes me laugh every year because at our opening retreats, they walk in there, they're 50 strangers and they're like, you want us to do what? And every year they're nervous. And every year after the 2 days of the opening retreat, the friendships that form, it blows my mind. It's absolutely incredible, but the process works. And what's really unique about what we do, and we talk about this when we first meet everybody at the program overview, but as an adult, you don't get a lot of opportunities to step outside of your responsibilities at work, for your family, any other roles of caregiver that you have, and all the responsibilities that just come with being a grown up. You don't have a lot of opportunities to go do something that is about your growth, your self-awareness, your development. And when you come to a leadership program, you kind of get to invent who you want to be during that experience. And you're making friends as a grown up, which is rare. We don't have a lot of opportunities to do that. And you can put yourself in situations that are definitely uncomfortable, but they are opportunities to grow and see what you're capable of. And, a lot of folks are risk averse these days, and we toe the line, and we don't have a lot of chances to push ourselves out of what we know and what we're familiar with. And leadership gives everybody an opportunity to do that at a level they're willing to embark on. And I think that's a really special aspect of what we do.
Well, and I think, that idea of great things happen when you're outside your comfort zone. I agree wholeheartedly. I think the difficult thing with that is when it happens naturally, like if you go through a traumatic experience and you're in survival mode and you're learning new things because you have to, whether you lost your job and you had to learn new skills to get a new job to put, food on the table, or if something happened, wherever to someone you love that you're taking care of and you have to learn new skills to do that. So when you're forced to learn and evolve, or else that's when, then magic happens there. But then when you guys are doing it, and that's where I think you get the nervous, because people know what's coming. Oh, I have to do something I never did. And it's not like they're forced. You know what I mean? They signed up for it. They have to go. They know there's a date and a time and they're going to be there. But I think if you kind of, it's like you put a blindfold on and shove them in the room and just get through it. And then the same thing will happen. The magic happens. But they're the two things, the organic way to be forced outside your comfort zone, and then the way where you're choosing to do it because on the other side you're going to develop as a leader. So it's it's two different things. The end result's the same. It's just the process is different, right?
Yeah, and sometimes it's in between. Like we get folks who say, "Well, my boss had they said I had to come here, or else I wasn't going to get."
Exactly.
A lot of that. And you know what? They're usually the ones who have the best time because they didn't know what to expect, and we don't take ourselves very, very seriously. So we have a lot of fun all year long. And it's, a lot of times it becomes the retreat for people, and it's their one day a month when they get to really lean into things that they love and finding passions they never knew they had. And yeah, I mean, that's where resilience comes from, right? That's where grit comes from, is when you get a little uncomfortable. And I think if anything, these last couple of years, we have to remind ourselves of that it's easy to stay in your space and not branch out. But these days, making sure that you have opportunities to take a little bit of risk and have a little bit of fun and see what you're capable of are really, really important.
Yeah. Ships aren't built to stay anchored in the port, right? You're supposed to get out there and seek adventure and let that sail go and get after it. Now, what you mentioned things that you learned, you learned over the years of doing this, but in this last year, is there a leadership tip, a leadership skill that you could think of that you learned, a tool that you put in your toolbox in this last year?
Oh my gosh, this one. Well, okay, so I moved into this executive director role in 22. So it was July of 2022, and I had done this job for about 8 years before that, and had over a decade of just workforce experience as well. And what is so ironic, I think, because I mean, we literally teach this stuff, right? But what we see all the time is that folks who get put into leadership roles are usually the ones who are really good at their job, like from a task perspective, right? They're usually the ones who get promoted into management or into administration, into leadership. But it's two completely different skill sets, right? And so often we are put into these leadership roles and no one teaches you how to do that part. They know you were good at your job, but that's not what you can continue to focus on. And so I definitely struggled with that. I was close to the programs. I ran the programs for all those years. And in a leadership position like mine now, you have to be spherically thinking all the time. And it's the greater good of the organization that's your responsibility now, and the livelihood of the people in your charge, and everything from the financial stuff to the operational stuff. And I had to definitely learn how to step outside of my proximity to the day-to-day functioning of the programs and start learning how to think differently and bigger in the executive director role. So I think that piece and the actual execution of thinking differently has been something that I've been working on very closely, and what that means to be strategic at a level that is going to take you into the next 2, 5, 10 years, and how you make an organization grow, and a nonprofit organization at that, right? And in a climate that can be very, very challenging. So I think that's what I'm most proud of are the structures we've put in place, and the way that I've moved some of our team into roles where they really shine and love what they do. And so that strategic, bigger picture thinking has been a big source of growth for me in this role.
And that's usually the most challenging part of growing in leadership, from my perspective, is when you kind of you're forced to rise above and see the bigger picture, right? And then you're not as connected to the day-to-day areas that you once were, that were probably your strength and why you were a leader in some capacity to begin with. And so that's why you were saying it's so important to have systems that work, because now you're leaning on systems and departments and protocols, and because that has to work, because you can't spend as much time, just granularly with what you used to do, because there's 17 things over here you have to do. So you can't, you know what I mean? So all the things that are put in place have to work, or the whole thing is just going to crumble. So yeah, you're 100% right. And that's the hardest thing, because everyone who when you're doing something well and you think you're doing a good job as being a leader, it's because you're invested in that one thing. That's your singleness of purpose that you're dealing with, or a couple things. And then when you pull back and realize, wait, I have a dozen things that I have to have the same amount of priority about, that's the hard part. So yeah, absolutely, I could completely understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think, you're dancing that line between micro leading, where you're aware of the details, you're invested in them, but you got to let go of the reins a little bit and let your folks do what they do well, versus micromanaging, where you're just up in everybody's business, and nobody likes that, and it's exhausting. And when you do that, you burn out so fast. So it's definitely an exercise in letting go, and I think trust is so critical amongst your team, and both ways, right? They need to trust you, you need to trust them, and that doesn't happen without a lot of transparency and open communication, and creating that psychological safety, and everything that we know helps people thrive in a culture that's very intentional, where ideas can be shared, failure can happen, things can crash and burn, and you come back more resilient than you were. And, I'm very aware of all of that. So it's a juggle for sure, but it's so worthwhile. And what we're so lucky with here at Leadership, I think, is that our purpose is so clear and so strong that even in our toughest moments, we have that to pull us through.
And I think that's an advantage that people who come from the world of education to go anywhere else have. And what I mean is, when you're dealing with school-age children, when you're dealing with students, their BS meter is very sensitive. They know in a heartbeat if you're being authentic, you know what I mean? If you're fake, or they know, and they'll, number two, they'll let you know about it, and they'll control the narrative if you let it. And I think that lends itself to, you talked about trust. When people know that what you're saying and what you're doing is authentic and meaningful, and you're not just saying the company logo because you want to go up the ladder, then they become invested, right? And then it's a team, and then it's we, and not just, well, I'm doing it because so all that. And I do think that being in education and dealing with those, 20, 30 sets of eyes on a daily basis, and then they know if this person is, just mailing it in today, or if they truly care, because we go back and forth on this podcast a lot about people don't care what you know until they know that you care. And that transcends everywhere. Whether what group of people you're with, if they think you're for real, you're going to get buy-in. So, and I know that's definitely something that is echoed throughout all your programs.
And I think if, they know you care and they feel significant in the grand scheme of it all, that they realize that they're being considered and valued, and we're nothing if we're without our people here. So we do a lot of work trying to see people for who they are and what they need and what they bring to the table and how they can really highlight what they're capable of. And we try to help people find their potential and really lean into it. And that's what, oh my goodness, when that happens for a person, it's get out of their way, because nothing that they can't do. And I see that in education all the time.
Now, if we could go back in time and you could have a conversation with 13-year-old you, what advice would you give, 7th or 8th grade Jess about life and about what you've learned along the way?
How much time do we have? Well, first of all, I would say stop wasting all that money and invest it in something significant when you're 18. But,
right.
I recently found a whole bunch of I used to journal a ton in high school and stuff. And it turns out I'm not all that different than I was when I was 13. Gosh, I think I would tell her to trust herself more and to let her intuition guide her more than she second guessed it, and that the process tends to work out. But, I mean, I've had a lot of experiences in my life, and I wouldn't trade a single thing that I've learned or any wisdom that I've gained from any of it, because I believe I'm able to use all of what I've learned in what I do today. And I'm so proud of the work that we're doing that I wouldn't want to change a thing.
Well, it's in that process, that journey has made you who you are, and you've collected artifacts and tools along the way. And if it changed in any way, you wouldn't be who you are and where you're at. So I completely get that. I mean, one of the things that a personal story here, our daughter is actually just took the California bar exam. She's out in Los Angeles taking it, and Dominique, yeah. And she's, well, and naturally, I mean, studied all summer. For anybody, out there who have, lawyers in the family or kids in law school, you understand it. That's a huge undertaking. And she spent all summer, locked in a room, 8 hours a day studying, goes out there to take that. And, at times they have their breakdowns where I don't know if I can do this. And I always try to impart to her, I always tell her I have a delusional sense of self-confidence that sometimes gets me in trouble, but I wish I could give that to her, because you almost have to think I can do anything, and you're going to fall short a lot of times. And I think that's what you're talking about, that, the younger versions of us, we don't have that. You're worried about everything. If you remember back in middle school and, 9th and 10th grade and stuff, everything, your world is shattered in a heartbeat. The way that someone looked at you, or the note they passed you in class, or, because we didn't have the internet stuff and, social media back then, but and you're afraid of everything, because everything you're going to do is going to be looked at this way. So that self-confidence really comes, to us later, or for lucky people, they have it their whole life. But that's definitely something that you second guess yourself so much when you're younger, and you just wish when you see your, young people going through stuff, or your kids growing up, just have some of this, just believe you can do it. Even if you can't, then you can get through, you can push through that first wall, and then the other stuff, you figure it out. So no, I hear what you're saying. Where do you talked a little bit about, where leadership's going, but where do you see it in 5 to 10 years? Are there programs that you guys have, blueprints of that you want to start some new things coming, or where do you think the whole program's going to be in the future?
Oh, I love that question. We talk about that a lot. I think that so right now, we have 3 full-time employees and 1 part-time employee, and what we produce with that in conjunction with just some phenomenal community partners and volunteers, it's really extraordinary what this organization is pumping out into the community, into the region. We are constantly talking about new ideas, and to the point where I think sometimes, I have to stop adding things to our good idea pile, but it's a neat time because we have access to people and things that we didn't have 10 years ago. And we see needs for this kind of development in so many industries that we would love to design just specific types of trainings that are more custom based.
Mm-hmm.
What we've seen, what impact the leadership program for teachers has done in these couple of years. And, that was a missing piece. Having been through teacher development programs, there's a lot of what we talk about and impact that teachers don't get. And that the difference that has made alone is very convincing that, where else can we take this? So we talk about it all the time. It's a capacity issue. It's a resources issue. We're always raising money for the organization. It's a big part of my job. So we have to leverage what we can. Everything that we do is because of the partnerships we have with organizations throughout Northeastern Pennsylvania. So we're mindful of that. But truly, I believe this organization can be bigger and more evolved than it is even now. So stay tuned. We have some cool things in the works.
Awesome. Well, I do think, I've known about everything you guys do, for my entire career as a school administrator in Northeast PA. There's been a program, and from the beginning, and then I've seen programs grow and evolve, and you guys do tremendous work, and it doesn't matter what age group you're working with. I've known so many people that have gone through, students, like I said, our own kids, and it's a tremendous organization, and we wish you continued success, and I am looking forward to more things coming, from you guys in the future. So we're going to wrap up soon. And like I said before, I try to look at doing this for 20, 25 minutes, and I turn around and it's almost an hour. So it's because it's always a fun conversation, right? But before we do go, is there anything that we didn't bring up that you wanted to talk about? Anything about yourself or about the program, or anything at all that you want to throw a shout out, or a person or anything?
Oh gosh, there's so many people. Well, I just want to say to you that I think you're doing great work here. Conversations that you're having, I think these conversations need to be had and explored. And, best things come out of really insightful and intelligent people coming together and trying to solve problems. So kudos to you. No, I think since I have the platform, I'd love to thank the team and the volunteers that we have making all of this happen. I have 3 incredible kids, 1 going off to college and 2 moving into middle schools and high school. And I'm able to do what I do because of the incredible support systems that I have. My mom and dad and my family are just the most unbelievably generous and supportive people. And all of that contributes to what Leadership Northeast is able to do in this region. So I guess if I'm giving any shout outs, just to the remarkable people in my life who make this happen and make it possible for me to do what I do.
Well, that's really cool. And thanks for the kind words about the podcast. It's been a lot of fun. And I'll ask if we could, visit again, maybe, a few months down the road to kind of check in with you and all the great things that are happening at Leadership Northeast.